he mentioned Dhul-Qarnayn is Alexander the Great. And it kind of spread amongst the masses, and this is what happens, subhanAllah, how thoughts spread even if they're incorrect. And so many people thought Dhul-Qarnayn is Alexander, but this is really almost 100% wrong for many reasons. Most obviously is that we know a lot about Alexander the Great. We know a lot about him. And he was not a believer in Allah, he was a pagan. He worshipped the idols. And Allah praises Dhul-Qarnayn as being a worshipper. And Allah praises Dhul-Qarnayn as being a righteous person. And Allah never praises paganism. And Allah never praises someone in this manner. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentions Dhul-Qarnayn says, قَالَ هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. So Alexander, really almost impossible. Some modern commentators have said that it is the Persian King Cyrus, who ruled from around 600 to 530 BC. So we're talking about 2,600 years ago, the Persian King Cyrus. And Cyrus, they say he's a candidate because he ruled over perhaps the largest empire the world has ever seen, or maybe the second or third largest. You know, there have been these massive empires. Alexander the Great probably did rule over the most largest empire, but temporarily. The Muslims, by the way, ruled over the largest for the longest period of time. But that's a different thing. Alexander for a period of time had more, but it fizzled out with his death. The benefit or the beauty of Islam is that wherever the Muslims went, Islam remained, and Islam and the Muslim civilization was the largest, but it wasn't unified as solid, if you like, as it was under Alexander. So they say Cyrus. But firstly, there are a number of things that don't match up, and secondly, once again, Cyrus was a clear-cut pagan. There is a third theory that I personally am very sympathetic to. But these are just theories in the end of the day. If you don't like it or you like it, it doesn't matter. It's just my opinion or the opinion of some modern scholars. If Dhul-Qarnayn were a historic figure, what do I mean by historic? I mean somebody whom we know. Because it is always possible that Dhul-Qarnayn is pre-history, pre-recorded history, because recorded history begins around 4,000 years ago. Before that, we don't really have records. Before that, it's just unknown. It's a big black box. Perhaps Dhul-Qarnayn is of that time frame. Allah knows. As for recorded history, it goes back around 4,000, roughly 4,000 years or a bit more than that. And we know pretty much all of the massive empires and the great kings of that time frame. If Dhul-Qarnayn was one of the kings of this era, then we should know about him in terms of recorded history. Humanity would have known of these types of great kings who have conquered large swaths of the earth. So another candidate that I am personally very sympathetic to is the Persian Emperor Darius. The Persian Emperor Darius, who ruled 550 to 486 BC. And Darius ruled over most of the known world at that time, most of what we now call Asia Minor, the Caucasus, the Balkans, Central Asia, even Egypt, North Africa. He had a massive empire, and he himself traveled to the furthest east and the furthest west. And he led expeditions in his entire kingdom. And he fought against the Egyptians, he fought against the Chinese, he fought against, or the people of that region, call them what you will, but he fought against all of these people. And what is interesting about Darius, unlike Cyrus and definitely unlike Alexander, Darius was a monotheist. In contrast to the people before him and after him, we know from the books of history that Darius was an ardent monotheist. He was a strict believer in one God. He was beloved to his people. He had the reputation of being a just king. And we have records of Darius. We have inscriptions to this day of Darius in which he is saying, I am the king, Darius and whatnot, whom God has given power, whom God has bestowed power to. In other words, هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. Literally, God has blessed me with this power. It is very rare to find an ancient king who basically, Fir'aun said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. Right? It is very rare to find an ancient king who is saying, look, I am a king, but the one above is the one who made me the king. He's the one who gave this to me. So, and by the way, there's also a very enigmatic inscription of Darius in which he is depicted as having two horns as well. So that kind of adds a little bit of a spice, to the whole mix there, that Darius seems to be a likely candidate, and he was an ardent believer. Now, some can say, for those of you who know your history, but Darius was was a Zoroastrian. And we say, well, there was no Islam per se at this point in time. We're talking 2,000 years ago. And Darius believed in the one supreme God that they called Ahura Mazda. And that was their name for them, but it was one God that they believed in. So Allah knows best. We are not 100% sure in any case. And it is also possible that Dhul-Qarnayn could be somebody in recorded history whom we don't know. But that seems a bit difficult to swallow for someone like me. But those of you who wish to, they can do that. But you have two main options in my opinion. Either it's one of these historic figures or it's pre-recorded history. But then the issue comes again to make the issue more enigmatic. Generally speaking, Quranic history is recorded history. Yani only Nuh and some are history. Otherwise, Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, the rest of them, they're basically in the time frame that most civilization is known. So Allah Ta'ala knows best. In any case, Dhul-Qarnayn is called Dhul-Qarnayn according to our tradition, either because he had 2 streaks of white hair, or because he wore a helmet with 2 horns, and Darius is depicted as 2 horns, or because he went to the east and the west. So the qarn here is east and west, so the owner of the east and the west. So this is the notion of Dhul-Qarnayn. Now we're going to get to Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Before I talk about my own understandings and whatnot, let's see what else is mentioned. So this is Ya'juj and Ma'juj in the Quran. We don't have much about them other than they seem to be a race of savages. They seem to be a race that is barbaric, killing, looting, plundering. And Dhul-Qarnayn, who has never met them, is sympathetic that these people are bad. He just wants to build a wall to protect these strangers from Dhul-Qarnayn. So what does the ahadith say? The ahadith are numerous. In fact, in the 6 books of hadith, there are around a dozen narrations of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So it's not a small amount. There are around a dozen, Bukhari and Muslim have around 6 or 7. So it is mentioned in the most authentic books, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The concept of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is found in our tradition. And of these ahadith, is the hadith in Sahih Muslim where our Prophet ﷺ said 10 are the major signs of Judgment Day, and he mentions Ad-Dukhan, Ad-Dajjal, Ad-Dabba, the rising of the sun in the west, the descent of Isa ibn Maryam, and Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So number 6 on this list mentions Ya'juj and Ma'juj. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim. So he mentions Ya'juj and Ma'juj as being one of the 10 major signs. In another hadith, Sahih Bukhari, this is the Bukhari hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, actually the Muttafaq Ali, Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said that he quoted the verse in the Quran that يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّ زَلْزَلَةَ السَّاعَةِ شَيْءٌ عَظِيمٌ يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِالسُّكَارَى وَلَكِنَّ عَذَابَ اللَّهِ شَدِيدٌ. This is the beginning of Surah Hajj, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in it that this is Judgment Day, that, O mankind, fear your Lord. For indeed the earthquake of Judgment Day is something to be terrified. On that day you will see people, the mother will neglect her breastfeeding child, and people will walk around as if they are drunk, but they are not drunk, but the punishment of Allah is severe. And the Prophet ﷺ quoted this ayah, and then he said that when will this happen? When will people be so terrified? When Allah will announce to the angels or to Adam that, O Adam, take the people of Jahannam to Jahannam. And so from every 1,000, 999 will go to Jahannam. The Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, with those odds, how can we be safe? If every 1,999 are going to go to Jahannam, how can we be safe? What is the statistical chance of us winning? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, I give you good news. For every one of you, there will be 1,000 of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So this hadith, which is in Bukhari, is saying the quantity of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is astronomical, beyond what we can even comprehend. Hadith in Sahih in Musnad Imam Ahmad, that the Prophet ﷺ said that you complain that there is no enemy. Some of the younger Sahaba are wanting to have a fight. You're complaining we're not fighting, but you shall continue fighting there will always be qital once the fitna begins. That happened in the time of Uthman radiallahu anh. There will always be fighting